ESG. You've probably seen that acronym popping up everywhere. But for companies and their boards, it's become one of the single biggest challenges they're facing right now. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and see what a real-world ESG strategy actually looks like using the biotech firm GeneCapsule as our case study. Let's dive in.
So, let's just start with the big question right out of the gate. Is ESG just another piece of corporate jargon, another box-ticking exercise, or is it something much, much bigger? Something that's fundamentally changing how we measure a company's real value? For corporate boards, believe me, the pressure to figure this out is on.
Okay, before we get any deeper, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. ESG, what does it even mean? Well, it breaks down into three key pillars. You've got E for environmental. That's all about a company's footprint on the planet. S is for social, which is about people, how you treat your employees, your customers, your community. And G is for governance, which is basically the rule book, how the company is actually run, and who holds it accountable.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the huge challenge of just reporting all this stuff. Then we're going to walk through each pillar, the E, the S, and the G, using GeneCapsule as our example. And we'll wrap up with what I think is the most critical part, how all this data gets turned into an actual strategy that gives a company an edge.
All right, first up, the ESG reporting challenge. This is really the heart of the issue, and it's the reason why so many executives and board members are, frankly, losing sleep over this.
And you have to ask, why all the pressure? Well, this slide pretty much sums it up. This isn't just about feeling good. You've got investors who are now demanding this information to decide where to put their money. One slip-up and your company's reputation can be toast. Governments are rolling out more and more regulations. And, maybe most importantly, the best people, they want to work for companies that actually care about this stuff. The stakes are just incredibly high now.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty, starting with that first pillar, the E for environmental. We're going to see how a company like GeneCapsule, which isn't some giant factory with smokestacks, still has to think very, very carefully about its impact on the planet.
And you might be wondering about that, right? A biotech lab, it's not a coal mine, so what's the big deal? Well, as it turns out, these super high-tech facilities have their own pretty significant environmental footprints.
And here's what that actually looks like on paper. We're not talking about smog. We're talking about the massive amount of energy needed to run labs 24/7. We're talking about how you safely dispose of hazardous biological waste. How much water are you using, and where are all your lab supplies coming from? These are the real, tangible things a board has to track.
So next up, we have the S pillar, social. Because a company's responsibility, it doesn't just stop with the planet. It's also deeply connected to all the people it touches, from the folks working inside the building to the customers and communities on the outside.
For a company like GeneCapsule, this social piece is absolutely non-negotiable. Of course, it covers the basics like employee safety and diversity, but it also gets into some really high-stakes areas, like protecting incredibly sensitive patient data and making sure their clinical trials are run ethically.
This quote from their own board charter really hits the nail on the head. It's not just about the science. It's about the trust you build. That one word, trust, that's what the entire social pillar is all about.
And, of course, that trust has to be backed up by our final pillar, the G for governance. The way to think about this is like the company's internal operating system. It's the whole framework of rules and principles that make sure the entire ship is steered in the right direction.
And a visual like this is so powerful when you're talking about governance. In just one glance, anyone, an investor, a potential employee, can see what the leadership looks like. And there's a growing belief that a more diverse board simply leads to better, smarter decisions.
But it goes way deeper than just who's sitting around the table. Good governance means being transparent about how much executives get paid. It means making sure the board is independent and isn't just a rubber stamp for the CEO. It means having ironclad policies against corruption. This is the bedrock. This is what gives investors real confidence.
Okay, so we've looked at the E, the S, and the G. We've seen all this data that GeneCapsule is tracking. But here's the thing, just collecting numbers is not the point. The real magic happens when you turn all that data into a smart, forward-looking strategy.
This right here is basically the playbook. It's a cycle that never stops. You collect the data, sure, but then you have to analyze it to spot your biggest risks, and, just as important, your biggest opportunities. And then, this is the key step, you actually bake those insights into your core business strategy, set some real goals, and keep reporting back to the board.
And this really breaks down the difference, doesn't it? The old-school passive way is just reporting what happened. It's like, here's what our water usage was last year.
The strategic approach uses that data to look ahead. It says, okay, based on these trends, here's how we can invest in new tech to lower our future water use and save money. One is looking in the rearview mirror, the other is looking through the windshield.
So, if you take away one thing, let it be this. A great ESG strategy isn't just a PR exercise. It is not about looking good for the press. It's about building a smarter, stronger, more resilient company that can see what's coming and is built to last.
Which kind of leaves us with one final big question to chew on. In a world where everyone, investors, customers, employees, is demanding to know more, is this kind of radical strategic transparency becoming the ultimate corporate superpower? That's something every leader out there is thinking about right now.